She looked amazed at what was before her. She stared at the mountainous and bounteous meal that had been prepared for her. Never in her life had she seen such an offering. She wondered how long had gone into the preparation, into the presentation. Now she'd heard of the generosity of Yorkshire folk, but little could have prepared her for what she was now beholding. She carefully considered the tiny spaces between the trays and plates of food, checking if there was a table under there somewhere. There was barely a glimpse of the wooden surface, but she knew it must be there, though she chose to bang her knee against the leg of the table just to be sure. She was overwhelmed with what was before her, but there was something wrong. She was the guest, the welcomed and honoured guest. But why was she alone? So much had been made for her, but there was no one with whom to share it. No conversation, no discovery. It would have been easy to fill her belly, to feast, but it wouldn't be the delight she truly needed. For all that she was technically welcomed, she was alone at a feast that was losing all meaning. She remembered the words of St. Paul written to the church in Rome. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. They had indeed shared with her, but they had not practiced hospitality. They had missed what it truly meant to share, what it meant to not just give, what it meant to practice a deeper hospitality, which isn't just about provision, but about sharing with. Being hospitable was to be with. No with means there is no true sharing, and no with means it's a false hospitality. If we truly wish to welcome someone, even within the constraints of coronavirus at the moment, it does mean to find ways of being present to them. It means not to just do to them or for them, but to genuinely seek ways to be with them and to do with them. In that image I created, in the story of a woman and a feast before her, there is genuine generosity, care, love and offering, and in no way would I ever want to diminish that. But what's missing is presence, attention and companionship, those things which transform generosity, care, love and offering into something more rich, more beautiful and delightful. I'm sure each of us has welcomed guests into our homes at various times, sometimes guests who were coming to stay. And when we do so, we get busy, don't we? We go out, we buy the food that we want to prepare and share with them. We prepare the bedrooms with fresh linen. We get everything ready, the house tidied and spick and span, so that when they come, they know that we are honoured by their presence, that they are welcomed and we want to do much for them. But none of us would do all of that and then spend no time with them. None of us would go to the efforts of making everything right logistically, but then spending no time with the people in our company. They become guests, not simply because they travel in and out of our house like some sort of Airbnb. They become our guests when we make time to be with them, to sit beside them, to listen to them and to share with them our own stories, to laugh and enjoy the logistics of preparation. The challenge of ministry can often mean the need to prepare, to plan and to organise, to facilitate. And after all that has been done, sometimes the thing that suffers most is the opportunity to be with. There is no doubt, as I talk to colleagues, that COVID and lockdown has challenged ministry in the ways we've understood it. And yet at the same time, the thing that I've discovered from my colleagues is how their ministries have risen above it in order that they could find ways of showing love and presence, albeit in new and unconventional ways. I'm not saying that ministers are only here to visit and be with us, but what I am saying is that the minister needs to find ways to be present to people, to be with them in community, in home and elsewhere. When I became a chair just a year ago now, I did have that sense of anxiety about how much time there would be for people. And one of the joys of the last year has been that actually there has been far more time for people, to be with people, than I imagined was likely. Sometimes, though, that has meant that other things have had to remain undone or take second place, because the priority has been to make time for people in very different ways and on very different occasions. I couldn't always do what my people might have wanted, but I desperately hope in the midst of that I did find ways of doing what was needed. As we come to today, as we come to celebrate a welcome, you might notice in that short little passage from the Gospel of Matthew, it was mentioned 6 times in 2 verses. To be honest, welcomes this year are not like previous years. This is a very different form of welcome where we can't do much of what we would normally do. This is a welcome where most people, and in some cases all people, are simply not able to be present. In some cases, a few can gather. In other cases, it's all online. It's that way in which the welcome has to be different, but still has to be about welcome, a true and genuine reception of the other person, in this case Nick, into our community, into our churches, and into the work of God in this place. And that welcome is a deep and rich thing if we let it be. Jesus tells us that whoever welcomes someone that he sends welcomes him. I will come back to that, but Jesus also goes on to say that whoever welcomes Jesus also welcomes the God who sent him. And that address of Jesus takes us to the very heart of welcome and what it means and how it's manifest. It's all about being with. It's all about encounter and relationship. We know when we speak of Jesus, we are speaking of Emmanuel, literally God with us. Not just God for us, but God with us, and that's key. The incarnation of God in Jesus is a statement and a practice of God to be with us. It is sometimes incredibly easy in the life of the church to be busy with setting the table for a feast and then wandering off in case we get drawn into anything more costly or committed. We prepare a table at the heart of worship with bread and wine. Preparing that table is one thing. But if we do not then gather around it together, with open hearts, hands, minds and mouths, then the preparation goes to waste. The fullness of the gift is not received. Unless we are with, what is left is a faint echo of the gospel's gift. I alluded earlier that it's sometimes easy to lose sight of that in the midst of ministry. To be with is instead replaced with activities that displace presence. God chooses in the history of salvation to put an act of presence at the heart of the story, to make it the sign of grace for all time. And as church, we need to ask ourselves, how are we truly present to others in our community? Do we often get too lost in providing for rather than being with? We give our buildings that we do for rather than genuinely spend time with. And does that become a way of escaping the true call of the gospel to be signs of love present at the side of people, not simply doing for them, but generally being with them? The day I set aside to write this sermon, I had a little chuckle in the morning because I was listening to music, and on this occasion a song by Tom Waits came up called God's Away on Business. Waits laments the sort of nature of the world as disordered, that there's a loss of fairness and goodness. Why? Because he says God's away on business. Fairness is absent and hope is lost to some extent because God's away on business. It feels like an almost backhanded appeal for a God who's present, for the God with us who is made known to us in Jesus. If we are to recover something of what it means to welcome and to be signs of God, to show that God is never away on business, never disinterested in how the world is and what the world needs, then we need to be in places where we can be welcomed, where we can be guessed, and in doing so, we can discover how we can be part of the presence of Christ and the gift of God to the world. When you welcome the one I send, you welcome me, says Jesus. As we welcome Nick in the midst of our congregations and into the community, he will be humbled and honoured to be the representative of Christ, to be Christ's presence in the midst of us. And I hope and pray that we will see something of Christ in the way that Nick meets with us, talks with us, listens to us, and engages with us. But my prayer is also that as church, we also can be that sign to other people, that we will be present with Nick in the things he does, present in our community with our neighbours. And only when we do that are we truly recognising what Paul extends to us, that need to share with our neighbour and to be hospitable. But also, if we're willing to be the host, if we're willing to receive the other into our midst, then we will also be open to the possibility of recognising Christ in the one he sends to us. We will find ourselves flitting from place to place as guest, as host, and in doing that, we'll have different sights of Christ amongst us. So, as we welcome Nick, take the opportunity to consider where it is you need to be welcomed. As we welcome Nick, consider where it is you need to be welcoming. Whether you are welcomed or welcoming, remember those things happen when we are with people, not simply doing things for them and then running from them. May there be much time to be with, and in being with, may there be glimpses of Christ and of the God who sent him. Amen.